Wow. I have really enjoyed our time together these last few weeks. I hope that you guys have as well. We've been looking at some stories from some characters from history who made the choice to follow God. And we looked first at Joseph, and we saw, how he stayed true to his commitment to God despite, his brothers hating him and despite his master throwing him into prison, despite demanding work, despite the temptation to get even with those who had wronged him, without any way of knowing how all of those decisions would turn out, he followed because, he knew that that was the best thing that he could do. And we looked at Ruth, and we saw the story of a woman from a foreign land, choosing to follow God despite probably, honestly, not really even knowing a whole lot about him, to be quite honest. And we saw her go against conventional wisdom and follow her mother-in-law, Naomi, in going to a land that was not hers to be with a people who were not hers, a place where she would have to start with nothing and find a way to survive. If her main priority had been self-preservation, she probably never would have gone. But success wasn't in the outcome of the choice. Success was in following. And we looked last week at Daniel, a man of incredibly high integrity. The story of Daniel and the story of his friends in the fiery furnace, for that matter, are stories that are worth telling because they set their hearts on following God. And that meant that sinning against him just wasn't really even an option. They volunteer to have their choice tested, and Daniel then serves foreign kings for 50 years, and no one can find a single thing to hold against him except the fact that he is incredibly devoted to God. That's their main issue with him, the only issue they had with him. And his devotion to God lands him in some trouble, that's true. But if you guys really go and look and read Daniel's story, his decision to follow, it got him in trouble, but it also left a lasting impact on the foreign kings that he served. Ultimately, Daniel is spared in the lion's den, but a favorable outcome is not what he was after, right? That wasn't why he did that. He faithfully followed when the outcomes were bad and when the outcomes were good. Following was the win. And these three stories, they really have left a mark on me. As I've studied them and as I've really looked into the choices that they made, and I hope that their stories will leave a mark on you as well. I realize I'm no Joseph, I'm no Ruth or Daniel either. I've never faced the things that they faced. And I would like to think that I could respond to pivotal circumstances in the way that they did. But honestly, how could I really know what I would do in those situations? Well, I hope that after these last 3 weeks, what we've learned is that we don't have to make a decision to not seek revenge on those who have wronged us, or to leave our families and our people and leave the lives that we know. We don't have to decide if we're willing to compromise our morals or our integrity in various different situations. They didn't either. Those were not the choices they made that mattered. The choice they made to follow was the one that mattered. And then that choice dictated how they would respond to everything else that happened in their lives. That choice is in front of each and every one of us as well. Jesus has extended an invitation to all of us to make that same choice, to follow. See, Christianity is not just an endless game of Jesus Says, right? You know, right? The church version of Simon Says. Jesus says, stand up. Jesus says, sit down. Jesus says, pray more, read your Bible. Jesus says, pray harder. Jesus says, don't have too much fun because that's not good. Jesus says, give more money. He's always saying that. You know the game. that sometimes we play. And when we're doing good, when we're keeping up with all the things that we've been told Jesus doesn't like, and when we're keeping up with doing all the stuff that we've been told that he wants us to do, we feel like we're doing pretty good. And we have this tendency to be a little bit critical sometimes of the other people that are playing the game with us, right? Oh, they did something that they're not supposed to do. You're out. You're out of the game. You stood up when they didn't say, Jesus says. I know it's kind of figurative, but I think you guys understand the game that sometimes gets played. The other problem is sometimes we have a tendency to get a little bit judgmental. I would argue the real word that we should use here is jealous of anybody who's not even playing the game, right? Hey, they're not playing the game right. I've got to do all this stuff. Like I have to keep all these rules. I got to do all these things. Why don't they have to do that stuff? It's just not fair. And maybe, just maybe, thanks to the Jesus Says game, at some point along the way, you realize, you know what? I think I like being out of the game better than I like being in the game. I'm not sure I even want to continue to be in the game. Or maybe at some point you just realize that you didn't like the judgmental person that you became when you were playing the game. And so at some point you decided, you know what? I'm out. I'm out of the game. I'm just not going to continue to play the game. I don't want to play anymore. I'm out. If you have ever felt that way, or if you have still been playing the game to this day, I have some really great news for you today. If you could wipe your memory completely clean of everything that you've ever heard about God and Jesus and religion and church and the Bible, if you could just wipe the slate completely clean and all you had were the accounts of the life of Jesus. That's it. Wipe everything else out, and all you have is the account of Jesus' life. In Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you know what you would discover in there? You would discover how incredibly relational being a follower of Jesus actually is. In fact, there are 3 different types of relationships that Jesus often consistently referred to when he would talk about the idea of this whole religion thing, right? Jesus said that the reason he came was so that you could understand the Father, right? We can refer to God as Father. That's a relationship. That's relational. It's like a father and child relationship. And God is not a reflection of your Father. God is the perfection of Father. So father, child, that's relational. And a couple of times Jesus talked about it like a vine and a branch. He says, I am the vine and you are a branch. And the vine doesn't say, hey, branch, go and do this and do that. No, the vine gives life to the branch. And he talks about how as you learn to abide in me, you will learn, you will grow, you will go, and you will do things. But that's what happens. It's all very relational. It's a symbiotic relationship. The vine provides life to the branch, and it grows. And then, a few times he talked about a shepherd and sheep. And in their culture, this was a huge deal because people back then, they understood that shepherds cared for sheep. And Jesus says, my sheep, they hear my voice and they recognize me. He's like, you know what? There's lots of sheep out there. I understand that. But my sheep, the ones that are in a relationship with me, all I have to do is speak. And it's like, oh, hey, that's the shepherd. Let's go. And they just come and they follow me. They come and move in my direction. It's all, again, incredibly relational, which means that if our approach to Christianity is anything less than that, or if it's anything more than that, then we've missed something. Because you have been invited, and I have been invited into an extraordinary relationship. So if you look at the Gospels, at the accounts of the life of Jesus, the word that Jesus used over and over and over again, the word that he kept coming back to time and time again is this word, follow. Right? Jesus extended the invitation to follow to every single kind of person imaginable. All kinds of people, to rich people, to poor people, to people who were religious, to people who were completely irreligious, to spiritual people, to people that were non-spiritual, had no interest in any of that. He offered this invitation to everyone, to all kinds of people. He would just simply say, you know what, just Just come and follow. Just follow me. That's it. Just come with me. Just follow me. So what I would like to do is I would like for us to take a look this morning at one of the first accounts of Jesus saying this to someone. It's a bit of a familiar story. I realize that. And so I encourage you not to just check out when you feel like, okay, I feel like I've heard this story before. But whether this is a really familiar story to you or whether all of this is pretty new to you, even if you find yourself this morning maybe a little bit skeptical of all of this that we're doing and talking about, I think that you're going to like this story. And I hope that you love this story so much that you go and read the entire thing for yourself. Because it's really that good. It's that good of a story. This story is found in the book of Matthew, and it is Matthew's account of the invitation that Jesus made to him. And in Matthew's story, we see the simplicity of just follow, right? Matthew chapter 9, verse 9, is what it says. Again, this is Matthew writing. As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew. Matthew's writing this story, right? And apparently talking in third person is a thing we Matthews do. I guess that's just a thing that we do. He writes about himself, talks about himself in this way. It's just funny to me. Anyway, as Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. And Matthew was sitting at the tax collector's booth because Matthew was a tax collector. I mean, the only way that a tax collector could have been hated more is if he also sold drugs to children, because tax collectors were some of the most hated people in the first century in the world at that point, right? They were hated so much because they were Jewish people collecting Roman taxes, collecting taxes for the foreign government that ruled over them. And it's even worse than that, actually, because the way it worked back then is Rome had actually auctioned off the right to collect taxes to other people, to just random people. And so wealthy people, they would purchase the right to collect taxes. And then they could collect, if you owned this right, if you owned the right to collect taxes, you could take as much as you wanted. Didn't matter. Rome didn't care. As long as they got their cut, they didn't care how much you take. You could take as much as you wanted from whoever you decided to tax, for whatever reason you decided to tax. Now, I can't imagine anybody taking advantage of a system like that, but sure enough, people did, and they got very wealthy doing so. People made a lot of money doing this. They would tax everything, goods, foods, drink, the use of roads, bridges, harbors. They would tax anything and everything that they could tax. So Roman citizens, wealthy Roman citizens, would purchase the right to collect taxes, and then they would hire local people to actually do the collecting. I mean, and the thing about it is in that day and age, they would pay them so much money, it was virtually impossible to say no to a job like that. I mean, how could you possibly say no when they're going to pay you this much? But you can understand how deciding to be a tax collector would immediately make you a hated person, right? They were considered to be traitors, people who supported Rome at the expense of their own people. So Matthew is one of these people, one of these despised, hated traitors to his people. And Jesus walks up to this port. Matthew is sitting there at the tax collector's booth collecting taxes. I mean, can you imagine the things that Jesus could have said to Matthew? I mean, as a Jewish man, I think about all the things that other Jewish men probably said to Matthew, right? People probably walk by him and, traitor, whisper under their breath as they're walking past him. Some people probably just shouted it right to his face, I would imagine. Not a huge surprise. Now, because I speak the language of sarcasm and jokes, I can imagine the jokes that people would tell, probably, with when they talk about Matthew, hey, Methuselah had a face only a mother could love, but even Matthew's mother agrees no one likes him, right? First century version of a Yo Mama joke. I can just picture the things, right? I mean, hey, I heard this story about this guy. He makes his living just stealing from people's land. That's all he does. But hey, he's not Matthew, so how about? I mean, at least he's got that going for him, right? I mean, Jesus, he sees this guy. He sees Matthew sitting there collecting taxes. And at this point, he's already got lots of people with him. There are people following him all over the place. everywhere he goes. So there's likely a crowd with him. And a moment that Matthew would never forget, and we know this because Matthew is writing the story, a moment that he would never forget happens. Jesus looks at him and he says, "Follow me." That's it. And this, isn't in the story, but I can imagine the people that were with Jesus, we can all kind of picture the collective groans when Jesus said this, right, to Matthew. It's like, did he really just say what I think he just said? Please tell me that he did not just tell Matthew to come and join us. Like, you literally could pick anybody else. Were there no, other really horrible people, to pick from? Like, you had to choose this guy. And there are a lot of things that Jesus could have said to Matthew. Hey, Matthew, why don't you put down all this money that you've been taking from these poor people? Hey, you know what, Matthew? Stop being a slimy traitor to your people. Hey, you know what, Matthew? Why don't you just stop doing this and maybe you can make something useful of yourself, at least something that isn't hated by all of society. But Jesus didn't say any of that. I mean, the people with Jesus probably would have cheered if he had said that. But he didn't say any of those things. He just said, "Follow me." And look at what this evil, wicked traitor Matthew did. As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," he told him. And Matthew got up and followed him. Now, hold on a second. It can't possibly be that simple. This guy is awful, right? He is the worst kind of people. I imagine the people already walking and following with Jesus, kind of being like, whoa. Hold on a second, right? This guy is terrible. There's got to be some kind of a process for him to be worthy of coming and joining us. How can you just ask him to come and be a part of our group? Now, I know that may seem like a bit of a stretch because I know that we would never treat anybody like that today. But I'm telling you that back then they were not happy to have Matthew joining their group. I mean, it's just, and this is, let's not make a mistake here, right? This is not Jesus asking him, excuse me, I'm sorry. Whew, something going on with my throat. Gosh. Thank you. Whew. Okay. It is drying out, I guess. I don't know what happened. Anyway, Jesus is not just inviting Matthew to go take a stroll with him and walk down the street and talk for a little bit. This is a formal invitation by Jesus, inviting Matthew to come and be a part of his group, to actually identify himself with Jesus, and Jesus in turn to identify himself with Matthew, and that's a big deal. People like Jesus didn't do that, and by like Jesus, I mean other religious people. I don't mean that there were other people like Jesus. But he's saying, you come and identify yourself with me, and I will identify myself with you. Not, hey, Matthew, stop doing this and start doing that, and I'll check back with you in a couple of weeks. See if you are deserving. See if you are qualified to join me. He just says, Matthew, you know what? Come and follow me. I heard somebody once say, grace is unfair until you need a little. Right? And I love this. This is a great statement. And isn't it so true? When we are in need of some grace, it's like, come on, can't you please just have a little bit of mercy? Can't you possibly just show me some grace? But when it's other people, it's like, man, that's so unfair. How could you possibly do that for them? But here's what gets me about a lot of people who believe in Jesus. When we are the ones that are turning to Jesus, we want it to be simple and easy. We need it to be. But when it's other people, perhaps people that we think are bad people, we act as though we want there to be more to it than that. And I mean, I'm just going to come right out and say it. That's messed up. That should not be a thing that we do. And that's not really part of the message for today, I'm just being honest, but these are my thoughts, something I've observed in 30 some odd years of church life and following Jesus. Like, it just shouldn't be a thing that we do. See, Jesus extended this invitation throughout the Gospels to all kinds of people, every type of person. And as we come to kind of the end of this series, as we get to the end of this series, the question that I want us to ask, the question I want all of us to ask ourselves is not how much do I know or what do I know, that kind of thing. Not even am I a Christian. The question I want us to ask ourselves is, am I following? Am I following? See, your version of the Jesus Says game probably has a lot of different things in it based on your experiences. I know that mine does. But what do you think might happen? What do you think might happen in our lives and in the life of Fair Creek and in this community? If instead of asking, am I going to church enough? Am I praying enough? Am I reading the Bible enough? These are all great things, by the way. Or, maybe in some cases, instead of asking, hey, are they praying and reading and going to church enough? Instead of asking any of that stuff, what if we just asked ourselves, am I following? Now, if you're thinking that seems too simple, it can't possibly be that simple. It's okay, because it seemed too simple to the religious people in Jesus' day too, right? I mean, imagine being like, this is, in Jesus' group, he's just invited Matthew to come and follow. Like, this is the worst person. I can't imagine, I can't believe that you would ask this guy to come and join us, and then this next thing happens. Verse 10, it says, while Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. So Jesus just says, hey, look, Matthew, you know what? Let's make this simple. Let's just go over to your house. Let's go to a place that's on your turf, a place that might be bad for my reputation, but it's going to put you at ease. It's going to give us an opportunity to begin to relate to each other. Jesus says, I just want to make this simple for you. And while Jesus is sitting there, and he's, at this house that the other people in his group probably didn't even want to go to, and it says that while they're there, many, many tax collectors and sinners join them. And the other guys, they're probably like heebie-jeebies, like creepy crawlies all over them. They're like, man, they're everywhere. They're all around us. What are we doing here? I've been in government buildings. I've been in entire cities that didn't have this many horrible people in it. And again, I find this somewhat just interesting. Tax collectors are so bad that they're listed separately from your just run-of-the-mill sinners. It was offensive to sinners to be associated with tax collectors. I mean, look, I'm bad, but at least I'm not a tax collector, right? Gosh, those people. But think of this in your context, with the names and faces of people that you know. Matthew's only friends, the only people that would hang out with him, the only people that would associate with him, the only people that would come to his house and have a meal with him were other traders, other tax collectors, and other various outcasts and wicked people. Religious people wouldn't dare be seen with him. That's the life that he lived. And here's why this is such a big deal, right? Because we are invited to follow Jesus, to follow the example that he set. And it's a huge deal. We are called to follow his example. So if you're here today and you're returning to church after some time away, maybe at some point along the way you got kicked out of church or you just felt unwelcome at church. Or if you're here today and you've been an avid church goer for many, many years, maybe most of your entire life, either way, I feel like you need to hear this. Jesus was extremely comfortable with people who weren't anything like him. And according to the accounts of Jesus' life, apparently people nothing like Jesus were very comfortable with him. And for a lot of different reasons, I'm sure that there's probably more than one person here who needed to hear that today, but it's absolutely true. People nothing like Jesus liked Jesus. And Jesus liked people who were nothing like him. Jesus would not be put off by you in your past, right? I want to say something here real quick before I move on. If you have had experiences with Christians that have left you or resulted in you feeling unwelcome, unloved, unwanted, feeling beat up and hurt, that's an us problem. It's not a Jesus problem. It's not. Because our Savior was unbelievably comfortable with people who were nothing like him. And that's the example that we are supposed to follow. Now, back to the story. While all of this is happening, right? They go over to Matthew's house. They're eating dinner with the worst people in society. Jesus has another group of people that are also paying attention to him too. Verse 11, it says, when the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? I mean, why is it that your teacher, who's like us, religious and all that stuff, why is it that he would choose to be with people that are nothing like him? And he didn't even invite us. He didn't ask us to be there too. They're so confused by this. They believe that they have a lot in common with Jesus. We're teachers, we're religious, all this stuff. But they're not sure that Jesus even likes them. And they know that they don't like him. And this is all just really confusing. He should be hanging out with us. What's he doing with those people? And Jesus, he kind of, feels a disturbance in the force. So he, this is what happens. In verse 12, it says, on hearing this, Jesus said, it is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. And then someone from the back of the crowd yells, ooh, you want some aloe for that burn? Ouch. No, I mean, I can imagine Matthew, right? Put yourself in Matthew's shoes. Hey, ow, are you saying that me and my friends are sick? And to which Jesus could be like, Matthew, you're a tax collector. You know you're sick. Come on, just stop it. And I mean, it's kind of funny, but let's be honest, right? You know it too. We know that we're sick. You know that you're sick. I mean, we're not even consistent with our own rules. We don't even keep the rules that we tell our kids that they have to keep. We break our own rules all the time. Matthew knew that he was sick. He knew that he needed help. He didn't need someone to tell him that. He was living the life. He knew. And Jesus says, you know what? You go tell the Pharisees that I'm in here with the sick people, the people that they will have nothing to do with. And you know what? While you're out there, why don't you tell them this too? Verse 13. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. In other words, Jesus says, I am not content with just being with people who believe the right things and behave the right ways. That's not what I'm here for. And this is so important because we cannot become a church. We cannot become a group of people who think that it is enough to just believe the right things and to behave the right ways. That is how you become a Pharisee. This story tells us that if we do that, we will find ourselves outside of the room that Jesus is actually in. And I don't know about you, but I want to be in the room with him. And if that makes me uncomfortable, I want to get so comfortable with being uncomfortable that it stops making me uncomfortable. I mean, when everyone else was saying, you know what, change and you can join us. Change, do this, do that, change, and then you can come and be a part of our group. When everybody else was doing that, Jesus flipped the whole thing upside down, messed everything up, and said, join me and you'll change. Follow me, it'll change you. Even if you don't believe what I say about myself, I'm willing to bet that if you follow me, you'll start to believe. And I would be willing to make that bet too. Stop the game of Jesus says. Follow him, and you'll start to believe. And that is the invitation to follow. Follow me. Joseph did it. Ruth did it. And Daniel did it. And his friends did it too. And they didn't find an endless game of Jesus says. No, instead, they found a perfect father They found a vine that gives them life. They found the Good Shepherd. They found a relational God that loves them, supports them, provides for them, cares for them, who knew all of their faults, knew just how sick they were, and wasn't uncomfortable around them. So here's a couple of things that you need to know about following. 4 things. The first one is being a sinner is a prerequisite. Okay? Matthew hadn't promised anything. Matthew hadn't repented of anything when Jesus invited him to follow. Every person who has ever followed Jesus was or is a sinner. The second thing, being an unbeliever doesn't disqualify you. Matthew wasn't a believer when Jesus told him to follow. How many times did Jesus chastise his disciples for their unbelief? A few times, just a few times. Thomas had such an issue with belief that he got a nickname for it. Right? You guys know. And even at the end, right? At the end of Jesus' story, when Jesus had died, there were no believers. No one believed when Jesus died. Then he rose from the dead, and then there were believers again. It's kind of a big deal. The third thing, the invitation to follow is an invitation to a relationship, not an invitation to obey all the rules, right? Rules do not make a relationship. That's not how it works. Think of it like this, right? I keep my marriage vows to my wife because I love her. I don't keep the rules and hope that will cause me to love her. That's completely ridiculous. That's nuts. That's crazy stuff. Rules do not make a relationship. The fourth thing, following forces me to focus on where I am rather than where you are not. The more aware I am of the work that God has left to do in me, the less concerned I am about the work that he has left to do in you. He's got a lot to do in me still. I can't sit here and be like, well, but what about them? And what about this person and that person? Nah. He's got a lot left to do in me. I can't be critical of the other people and what God has left to do in their lives. Just like the characters that we've looked at from this series, we are invited to make a decision. And so from now on, I hope that if you think of, Joseph and Ruth and Daniel and Hananiah, Michelle and Azariah, when you think of Matthew or really any of the disciples, I hope that this question comes to your mind. Am I following? Am I following? Now, I had a conversation this last week with someone who, in one way or another, has had to ask themselves this question. So many of you may know Ted and Beverly Jacobson, if you recognize those names. They are part of the Fair Creek family. The military moved them away from us some time ago, but we love them like family still, nonetheless. And they have a really amazing story. I'm going to invite Beverly to come out here with me. They have an incredible story that we want to share with you today. And, Beverly, we talked this last week about kind of the decision to follow and how that has taken you and your family on a journey you probably never expected that it would take you down. So how have you seen the decision to follow, even as it specifically relates to your family, to follow God with your family, how have you seen that choice then dictate how you would respond to other things that came about?
So I chose to follow Jesus when I was little. As I was growing in the Lord, I had this vision of what following Christ was going to look like. And I'm a godly man, and we got married, and I figured we would do life and ministry. We'd build our careers, putting God first. We'd have our 2.4 kids at the proper time after we paid off some debt, right? Well, then my father-in-law got a cancer diagnosis and was not expected to live very long. And all of a sudden, the Holy Spirit was pressing on my heart, and I started to reevaluate our life choices and started to think, actually, maybe this whole putting off a family thing, maybe that was kind of rooted in selfishness rather than following Jesus. I didn't want my father-in-law to pass away without grandkids. So we kind of ditched our 5-year plan, and the Lord blessed us with our first child. And in 3 years, we had 3 babies.
My father-in-law was in heaven by this point, and I was drowning in diapers and kind of feeling like, well, is this it? Is this following Jesus? What about my call? What about all the ministry and the things I was supposed to be doing? And then I had my first miscarriage. And I didn't even know that was a thing. Nobody talked about it. And I grieved. I didn't necessarily feel ready for a baby, but I was devastated that I'd lost one. And the Lord started taking me deeper into my relationship with him. And I realized that following him maybe meant that I wasn't in control. I thought I could control everything, including our children and when and where we had them. Anyways, fast forwarding, we opened up our hearts to whatever the Lord would do through our family. And by the time baby number 8 came, I was tired. And I said, Lord, this has been a good run, and I feel satisfied, I feel full. This is good. This is a good place to stop. 8 is enough, right? It's a nice even number. Right. We fit around the table. And
then all of that, right, leads to kind of this special project that has happened in your life, but really more so about Verity. What has happened with Verity? Tell us a little bit about that.
So, thinking we were done, finding out I was pregnant with our 9th baby, I wrestled with God a lot because I really did think we were done. And I finally came to terms with, okay, we're having one more. Okay, we can do this. All right, Lord. And then the phone call from the doctor came. And we learned that our sweet Verity had a condition known as Edwards syndrome, and she was not expected to make it to birth. Well, I'm going to give you a spoiler alert because she's 5.5 years old, and she'll be here in the next service, and she is the exclamation point to our family. But looking back, I see how following the Lord in a way that I never thought really, I thought I was in charge of that. I thought that was kind of, Ted's and my decision. But one decision led to another, to opening our hearts and following in the small things. And that really paved the way for this special little girl to enter our lives and turn them totally upside down, and in a good way.
That's wild. That's so good.
So if it hadn't been for her, we would not have launched this ministry.
Right.
So going back to the ministry thing, I thought I was serving the Lord in my way and in how I wanted to do it, but he gave me a whole new passion just through a series of steps day by day.
Now Ted and Beverly have actually taken what they've learned and their experiences with Verity, and they've started an organization to help parents and families who are facing pivotal circumstances with their little ones.